What would you do if at just 15 years old, you were kidnapped? How would you process the fear, the trauma, and the memories that followed? Could you ever truly heal? And perhaps the hardest question of all, could you forgive the person who changed your life forever? Our guest today doesn't have to imagine those questions. You see, in 1983, Steve McKell, he lived them. Join us as Steve shares his remarkable journey of courage, resilience, healing, and the choices that shaped the man he is today. Welcome to Santa's About. So this week's virtue is courage. And what a wonderful story of courage from an old friend who's been on the nice list.
Are you sure about that, Sam?
Since the very beginning. So Steve has a very unique story. And so really, let's just dive into it. Tell us a little bit about your story. Where did it begin? How did it unfold? And how did it end?
January 6, 1983. Grew up, as you know, in Cottonwood Heights, Salt Lake City. Attended Brighton High School. I think in 83 we were probably in the 9th or 10th grade at that time. Typically every day I think we got out of school roughly like 2:20 and I'd walk home, and my common behavior was to call my mom when I got home. This day wasn't unlike any other day, so I called my mother and checked in, and I had actually planned to go play racquetball at the Cottonwood Heights Spa, just a few blocks away from home, with a buddy who lived just a few doors down from me, Dave Freudenberger. And so my mom and I finished our conversation and hung up, and 3 o'clock the doorbell rang. So I assumed it was my buddy coming to pick me up to go play racquetball. So I grabbed my jacket and put my coat on and went to the front door, and surprise to me, it was not my friend, but it was an individual dressed in a brown uniform delivering a package. So who's that, Dave? Who?
No, it's got to be UPS, right?
UPS, the guys in the brown. So this individual had a package for my family and had a clipboard, because things in the 80s were different than things are now. So I signed the clipboard and gave it back to him, and he said, hey, I'm new on my job and my van is broken down around the corner, and I need to call my boss because I'm not sure what to do. Well, typically I would probably let that individual in my home, but for whatever reason that particular day I felt as though I was not going to let him in my house, so I said, no, I'd rather that you not. And at that point he reached into his brown vest and pulled out a small handgun and put it into my chest. And to be honest with you, I began to soil my britches just a titch. I didn't grow up around guns, and I wasn't familiar with guns, and here I am with a gun in my chest. And he forced his way into my home, shut the front door behind him as he went into the entryway of our home and went back in our dining room area. He pushed the dining room table out of the way, told me to lay down and put my hands behind my back, lay down on my stomach, put my hands behind my back. He said that he was a police officer making a drug bust. So I immediately asked for some identification, and he said, I'll show you in a minute. And he said, we're arresting all the kids in the neighborhood. And I said, I don't have any drugs on me. I'm not sure why you're involving me in this process. And you know me, Dave. I talk a lot, right? Normally. So what do you think I do when I'm scared? I talk a lot more.
We talk a lot more.
So this individual is in my house with a gun basically on me. He's now handcuffing behind my back, or handcuffing my hands behind my back. And then he proceeds to handcuff me at my ankles. Now, I was 15 years old. I obviously didn't know much about the law, but I'm thinking to myself, why is he now binding my ankles up when I'm not resisting arrest? So again, I asked for identification, and he said, me and my buddies are professional thieves, and we're just after money. So I asked, what I could show him in my home. I offered him my wallet, which probably had a couple of bucks left in it from lunch. He declined, and he continued to talk about other people being involved with him. My buddies are coming, or hey, me and my buddies are professional thieves. Well, now I'm handcuffed behind the back, I'm handcuffed at the ankles. He then takes a rope, ties it to the handcuffs on my ankles, behind my back and around my neck. So if I were to jerk my legs, it would then cause restraint on my throat. A few times I remember very, very clearly, he put the gun to my chin and told me if I didn't shut up, he would kill me. But I continued to speak to him, continued to talk, continued to ask questions, because I was scared to death and didn't know how to respond. So my response was to continue to speak to him. Well, eventually he told me to keep my eyes closed, and he had me now roll over on my back. So now I'm facing the ceiling, if you will, and he proceeds to take a bandana, and he doesn't just gag me with the bandana, he literally stuffs this full bandana in my mouth. tells me to breathe calmly through my nose. It's a good thing I didn't have a horrible gag reflex, which I do now, but if I did then, I would be in really bad trouble. He then takes duct tape and wraps the duct tape around my head 2 or 3 times to secure that bandana in my mouth, and again tells me to breathe through my nose. He then had a backpack on, takes his backpack off, and pulls out an old Polaroid camera. Do you remember the cameras?
Yeah.
Which I think they've made a comeback,
Right.
where you take a picture, right, and then it develops almost immediately, within a minute or two, yeah. So he takes 2 pictures of me with the Polaroid camera, of course tells me to keep my eyes closed. And then he puts those pictures aside, and then he blindfolds me. And the way he blindfolded me, I didn't know at the time, but I eventually found out what he had done. What he essentially did was put gauze pads over each eye, and then pulled a nylon stocking cap over my head. So now I'm blindfolded, I'm gagged, I'm handcuffed behind the back, I'm handcuffed to the ankles, and I've got a rope from the handcuffs on my ankles up behind my back and around my neck. He then tells me to stay where I'm at, as though I was gonna go somewhere, right? Goes out onto the front porch, where he had a large refrigerator-sized box on a dolly or a hand cart. Hand cart's one of those metal frames with a couple of wheels on the bottom of it, metal plate. Yeah. I hear the front door open, brings that into the house. Front door closes behind him. He lays that down. He returns to me in the dining area and now grabs me by my ankles and then drags me to the entryway of the home and essentially stuffs me into this refrigerator-sized box. And then he stands it up, telling me to lean against the support of the dolly so that I wouldn't cause the box to tip one way or another. And then he secures the lid. And then he again tells me, don't attempt to get out because me and my buddies will kill you. So here I am now in a position where I'm about to leave the security of my home, having no idea where he intended to take me. So I hear the front door open, and as the front door opens, I feel myself go out the first step and onto our very small patio. You've been to my home.
Yeah.
You lived in my home. Right. And then 2 more steps down a sidewalk, around a little corner, 2 more steps down a sidewalk, again onto the driveway, and then out. So I literally felt myself go off the first step. The door closed behind me. I feel myself go off 2 more steps, down the sidewalk, around a corner, 2 more steps, and we're off. And then from there, I have no idea where we're going. Down the street, about 4 or 5 houses down the street, he had a van pulled off to the side of the road, essentially waiting for us. And as we're walking down the street, I heard a neighbor of mine who was walking home from elementary school. She said, "Hey, is that a late Christmas present for me?" Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, if you only knew what was in this box. And of course, the individual that's kidnapping me doesn't say anything to my neighbor. He just proceeds on. And we get to the van, and I could hear the back doors of the van. So if you can imagine, it's just a standard size van, cargo van, 2 seats in the front, cargo space in the back. I hear the back doors open. I hear a ramp come out. He then returns to me. I can feel him pulling me up the ramp into the van. So my head's going towards the front of the van and lays me down, tells me to stay calm and remain obviously in the position I'm at. If I move one way or another, I'm going to cause that box to fall off the dolly, potentially pop the lid open, make things a little bit harder for him. I then hear the ramp being put back in the van, the door shut, and then he comes around the driver's side of the van. I hear the van door open and close, and then he said, I can see my buddies are coming right now. And then he tries to start the van. And as he tries to start the van, immediately it won't start. So you can imagine I'm back there praying, please don't start, please don't start. And the van's like, rrr, rrr. And I'm like, if he can't start the van, we're not going anywhere. Eventually the van started, unfortunately for me. He puts it in drive, and then he begins to drive away. Now, I don't know how true this is, Dave, but this is what I believe to understand and know is if you lose one of your senses, maybe your other senses become more heightened or more aware. Sure. Well, here I am blindfolded, I can't see, but I was very much so using my hearing to pay attention to what was happening. And I never heard another individual get in that vehicle. So I never heard another van. He could have simply fooled me if he would have opened and closed a door as though somebody joined him. Nobody did. He didn't do that, and nobody joined him. So now as we're driving down the road, he says in one voice, hey, ask the kid if he's okay. And then in a second voice, he's like, hey, kid, are you okay? And I'm thinking, there's no way nobody's with him. He's working alone, but he wanted me to believe somebody else was with him. So with a bandana stuffed in my mouth and a duct tape wrapped around my head, what am I going to tell him? No, I'm not good. So I just said, yeah, I'm good. I really didn't know what else I was going to say to him. And at one point in time, we went around a corner and the box actually fell off of the dolly and the lid popped open. One thing I didn't share with you is when at the house he blindfolded me, he asked me if I could see.
Sure.
I could see, but barely, out of the corner of each eyes. So both eyes I could see out the corner. What am I going to tell him? Shift the pad on the right to the left, whatever. I wasn't going to give him any direction on how to better blindfold me. So when the box fell off the dolly and the lid came open, I could see forward. Not seeing much, I could see 2 seats. I couldn't see if both seats were occupied or not. It didn't really matter. He immediately pulled off the side of the road, resecured the lid, put the box back up on the dolly, and then continued on. So we went approximately 5 miles away from my home. We were now in the Holiday area, just north of what was then the Heather restaurant, I think it was. I think it's now the Tuscany. I was approximately 2 miles from there. He essentially took me.
Could you tell where you were?
Not at all.
Not at all?
Not at all.
Okay.
Had no idea what direction I was going, had no idea how far we had driven.
Right.
Didn't know the time that had elapsed, so no, none of that even registered to me. I think because I was probably so intently paying attention to trying to listen to what was transpiring, but no, I had no clue how far I'd gone.
So in your mind, do you remember consciously going through some thoughts of, I can't do this, I can do this, and I should be paying attention to this? Or was it all more of a panic survival stuff going through your head?
I think it was a combination of both, to be very honest with you. Initially, I wasn't trying to plan anything out. Sure. I think I was in a fight or flight mode. I was just trying to pay attention to my surroundings, didn't know where I was going. But as I get to my next steps, I'll share with you that yes, things began to change for me, and I did go through some synchronized steps, if you will, to try and survive. So initially, no, but as things moved on and as I became a little bit more calm, yes, I did change my mindset just a little bit. So we back into a driveway. I didn't know at the time this house was vacant. We back into a driveway. He turns the van off. He comes to the back of the van. Again, I hear the doors open, the ramp come out. He wheels me out of the van. Now this is January. No snow on the ground though, kind of much like the winter we had this year. So no snow for him to have to deal with. I had grabbed my jacket, thankfully, when the doorbell rang. Thought it was my friend, so I put my coat on, so at least I had my jacket on. We go into the backyard, and about 75 yards away from the van in the backyard, he wheels me, lays the box down now, assists me in getting out of the box, and he takes me into what I'll refer to as the chicken coop. I didn't know that's what it was at the time. In fact, I felt dirt under my feet, so I wondered if he was taking me into a cellar. I didn't really know. Right. All I know is he was helping me walk. And if you think about a handcuff, the chain is only 2 or 3 inches long, right? So I'm taking shuffled steps. I could have hopped, but I thought hopping might cause some restraint on my neck, so I simply shuffled my feet. I heard the door open of this chicken coop. And if you can imagine, the chicken coop is maybe about a 12 by 12 building. We come in on the northwest side of the chicken coop, in through a door, and as we go into the chicken coop, about 6 feet in front of me, there's a concrete slab that's about 3 feet wide. It's the length of the chicken coop, so about 12 feet, and it's about 18 inches thick or deep, if you will. And he assisted me up onto that piece of concrete because on the other side of the concrete was a hole in the ground. And the hole in the ground was, again, the length of the building, which was 10, 12 feet. It was about 3 feet wide, and again, it's as thick, if you will, as the concrete. So it's surrounded on all 4 sides, concrete, wall, wall, and wall. And it has a wooden frame around it. He assists me into this hole in the ground, lays me down in this hole in the ground. There's a 2x4, basically there's 2x4s all around the hole, but now there's a 2x4 crossing my face, a 2x4 crossing my upper chest, and a 2x4 crossing my ankles. After he gets me laid in, he then takes what I thought at the time was a piece of rope, ties it around my ankles and then around one of the posts down by my feet to secure me to the wooden frame. And then he lays a piece of plywood on top of that wooden frame. And he then begins to nail into the 2x4 across my face, the 2x4 across my upper chest, and the two by four across my ankles. So if you were to walk into this chicken coop, you would literally see a hole in the ground per se, but with just a piece of wood over the top of it. You wouldn't actually be able to see me. And that's how he secured me in this chicken coop, was by putting me, but essentially buried me alive. And then he says to me, if you attempt to get out, my buddy's here, again, referring to somebody that's with him, my buddy here will kill you. So obviously I remained in place. I heard the chicken coop door open and close. I then, a few minutes later or a minute later, hear the van struggle to start. I hear the van start, it peels out, and it's gone. So this is where your question earlier might come into play, because now I have some options, right? I have some choices to make. I can A, lay there and allow him to complete whatever task he had chosen to do with me that day, right? Or I can fight for my life. Right. Because I figured, to be frankly honest with you, I wasn't going to survive that day anyway. So I thought, if I'm going to go down, I'm going to go down trying. I'm going to go down swinging. I'm going to make my best attempt to escape from the situation that I'm in. So the first thing he did was, when he put those nails into the 2x4 across my face, those nails actually stopped right prior to going into my cheekbones. It was kind of interesting. There was one nail right below each eye. Had he shifted one direction or another, one of those nails would have gone directly into my nose. Those nails didn't stop because they hit my skin. They stopped because they had reached their full potential. They were like an 8 or 10 penny nail, and he had driven those into the wood. They hit their full potential. He moved on to the next nail. Those actually became an advantage or a blessing for me, and that's how I was able to remove the blindfold. So what I first did was, I got the blindfold caught on those nails, and I slid my head forward. And if you can imagine, the gauze pads fell off my eyes, and I still had the stocking cap on. So the stocking cap's above my eyebrows. Now the blindfold's gone. Not that that aided me at that exact moment, but now I could visually see what's transpiring. The next thing I chose to do was, I began to kick the plywood. Now, people tease me because I have little feet, but thankfully that day my little feet gave me enough leverage in that 18-inch span to begin to kick, and as I began to kick, all of those nails began to pop out. If he would have used grabber screws, I wouldn't have been able to do that. But as I kicked, every one of those nails popped out. So now the plywood is on top of me, but no longer secured to the 2x4s across my body. Then I realized that my feet were tied to the wooden frame. So I just thought, I can just jerk a few times and that rope will break. Well, it wasn't rope, it was baling wire.
Oh man.
Baling wire, I wasn't going to be able to snap that. The next plan that came into my mind was to lift up. So there was that 2x4 I mentioned before that went across my ankles. As I lifted up, that literally the whole frame came off the ground down by my feet, and that baling wire fell off the post that it was around. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So instead of having to break it, it literally just fell off because the post was off the ground high enough and my feet were far enough away. When it fell away from that post. So now the baling wire is still around my ankles, but I'm no longer secured. And I always get asked about the rope around my neck. I don't know if he misjudged my height, if it was a scare tactic, but to be honest with you, every time I kicked or moved, I never felt a restraint around my neck because of that rope. The thing that hurt me the most, honestly, was the handcuffs. He didn't lock the handcuffs. Those handcuffs can be locked, right? And they'll stay in place in whatever position they're in. He didn't do that. So if you can imagine, every time I'm moving, those handcuffs were clenching as tight as they could go. Literally, I probably had an 1/8 of an inch gouge in my wrist, and I was actually beginning to lose a little bit of sensation in my hands because those handcuffs were so tight. But it didn't bother me enough to stop me from doing what I was doing.
Sure.
So after I got everything free from this wooden frame, I literally slid my head underneath the 2x4 across my face and upper chest, and I sat up. So now I'm sitting up and that plywood's leaning against me. I immediately rolled out onto that concrete slab, and I tried to stand up, but I couldn't because my hands behind my back and my feet. So I literally slid on my backside over to the wall, and I was able to get a hold of something to leverage myself to be able to stand up. So as I stood up, I now realized in this chicken coop that there's 2 doors, one to my left, which is the door he brought me in, and one to my right. I didn't know which door he had brought me in. Those were just the 2 positions of the doors. So I jumped off the concrete slab, hopped over, banged into the door on my left, and it would not open up. So I hopped across the chicken coop, jumped into the door on my right, and it immediately flung open. And as it flung open, I looked and I could see a horse corral, I could see a rock path that went up into these trees, and I knew he hadn't brought me from that direction because it would have been a pretty rough ride. It would have been difficult for him to navigate me through that area. So my thought was, I'm going that way, because if he's going to return, he's going to come the direction that he originally brought me, and I want to be ahead of him if that's even possible. Because again, I had no idea where he was. I didn't know where he was going to return, and I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew I'm out in the open, and I'm hopeful that I can find somebody that can assist me. I followed this rock path. It made a turn up these real jagged rock steps. In fact, I fell down a couple of times on those steps because they were they were made of rocks, very uneven, but my adrenaline was pumping at that point in time. I popped right back up, hopped up these steps, and I got on the top of this grassy knoll. And I could see where I was, and I knew exactly where I was. I knew I was on Holiday Boulevard, and I knew that to the south of me was the Carmelite Monastery. Do you remember that place?
Yeah.
It's where the nuns live, right? The nuns work for God, and in my mind, I thought, if I can get to the nun's door, I don't know. I literally was thinking, I don't know how I'm going to knock on the door, but I'm going to get there. I'm going to jump into the door, and these nuns are going to save me.
Right.
The problem with that plan was off this grassy knoll was a barbed wire fence. And I knew that there was no way that I would be able to finagle my way over a barbed wire fence in the position I was, not having the ability to use my hands. So I had to find an alternate route. And the only route I had was this yard was encased all the way around or fenced all the way around. I had no option but to go through the front entrance of this home by which I had been brought into, not knowing when
he'd return,
said kidnapper was going to return, or what he was doing, or if somebody really was watching me. So, you know, you talk about courage. I had to really muster up the courage to hop through the backyard of this house and find my way to the main entrance. But at that point, I was already far enough in that there was nothing going to stop me, right? I had no choice but to continue forging forward and pray and hope that I would make it out. And that's exactly what I did. So I got the courage, and I found my way out to Holiday Boulevard. And I was on the west side of Holiday Boulevard. Holiday Boulevard runs north and south. And I'm on the west side, and on the east side of Holiday Boulevard happened to be a young man, Native American young man, jogging northbound on the east side. Now, Dave, let's just stop for a minute and think what I look like, okay? I got a nylon stocking cap on. I got duct tape wrapped around my mouth area 2 or 3 times. I've got a rope around my neck. I've got my coat on, but it's now slipped off my shoulders. The only reason it's remaining on is because I'm handcuffed, and I'm handcuffed at the ankles. And there's traffic going by, nobody's stopping cars, and I'm trying to hide when cars are coming by because
you don't know which car's
him. So I hide a few times, and I'm like, this is my window. I have to, and it's a busy road because 215 didn't exist at the time.
Right.
So people that lived on the East Bench a lot of times use that as a thoroughfare. It's probably 4:30 in the afternoon now, maybe 5 o'clock. It's getting dusk and a lot of traffic. Break in traffic, I hop across the street and I literally jump in front of this kid. And he stops immediately. Now I'm concerned because not only is my life in jeopardy, but what have I done to this young man?
Sure.
I've put him in the same position that I'm now in. So he takes the stocking cap off my head, takes the duct tape from around my mouth, pulls the bandana out of my mouth. And I said, nothing more than, I've been kidnapped, I've just escaped, I need to get to a phone. Well, this young man was a student at Skyline High School, and he was a wrestler. Yeah. And he was jogging that night to lose weight for his weigh-in. So a strong kid. I probably, Dave, you could probably attest to this. I probably weighed 110 pounds. I was pretty small, not very heavy. But this young man literally picked me up like a sack of potatoes, threw me over his shoulder, and just took off running to a nearby house where fortunately a lady happened to be backing out of her driveway. He immediately stopped her and suggested that I needed to use their phone because I had been kidnapped. So of course she obliged and let me in her home. That's kind of a funny story in itself. She had, I believe, 6 kids, maybe more, felt like a lot, which was great because it became a distraction for me. And She brought me in the house, and the first instinct I had was to call my dad. I didn't want to call 911. I wanted to call my dad because I figured it probably had something to do with his employment.
Right.
So, do you remember the rotary dial phones?
Oh yeah.
That's what it was. Felt like it took an eternity to dial my dad's number. And these days we have cell phones. I don't know if I would have known my dad's work phone number because I just, you would just pull somebody up in your contacts and hit dial. I knew his phone number. One of the family members of that house that I ended up at dialed the phone for me. Of course, my hands are behind my back, and in the meantime, these kids are, when I say kids, they're my age and younger. They're trying to get the handcuffs off of me. They're trying to assist. They're offering me cake and ice cream. I mean, these kids are a huge distraction.
Sure.
So I make a phone call. I'm talking. It's my dad. I tell my dad, I said, Dad, I've been kidnapped, but I've escaped. And my dad said, son, I want you to immediately hang up and call the authorities. So we did. We didn't talk much other than that. We hung the phone up. One of the other kids dialed 911. I told the authorities that I had been kidnapped, but I've escaped. I said, I don't know exactly where I'm at, but somebody here at this house can share with you where we are. And so we called the authorities. And that's kind of where my story, if you will, stalls for just a minute, because this is where things start to pick up for my father, because obviously the kidnapper takes time to secure me, right? Now he's going to go and put my dad on a rat race, and he's going to put my dad through the ringer to try and make a money drop. My dad had received a phone call from the kidnapper prior to me calling him, telling him to get $125,000 ready and that he would call him back with further instructions. The kidnapper's next phone call came approximately 10 minutes later, but guess whose phone call came in between the kidnapper's two phone calls? My phone call. So here my dad is horrified that this individual calls and says, I've kidnapped your kid, I've got him, you got to get $125,000 ready, I'll call you back. Then your son calls and said, Dad, I've been kidnapped, but I've escaped. Then the kidnapper calls my dad back and says, do you have the money ready? And my dad says, yes, I do. I would ask you, is that coincidence? Or is that God watching out for not only me, but watching out for my dad? So there's just a lot of things that transpired that day that I didn't understand at the time, but I certainly do understand now. But so yeah, my dad here, he's in a position now where he's been told his kid's been kidnapped. I call him and tell him I'm safe. He didn't know if I was safe. He thought I might have been coerced to tell him that. He didn't know for sure.
Sure.
But he wasn't in a position where he could act too much on it, because he's already gotten a call that he's got to get money ready, and he's got to follow through with the kidnapper's demands if he wants his son's life to be saved.
So had the kidnapper indicated anything to your dad to convince him that he was legit, that he had kidnapped you?
Nope. He just called and said, I've got your son Steve. Get $125,000 ready, and I'll call you back with further instructions. So my dad did not hesitate. He immediately triggered the security alarm at the bank. They immediately took the threat serious. And obviously when I called, that escalated it to being, this really happened. And then my dad, who's since passed on, had a tough decision to make that day, because I was safe.
Yeah.
He didn't have to follow through with any of the kidnapper's instructions, but he wanted to apprehend or help assist apprehend the kidnapper for what had transpired. So my dad made the decision to follow through with the kidnapper's plans, because obviously the kidnapper had no idea that I had escaped. So my dad does follow through the instructions, and my dad was sent on a rat race. He was sent to 3 different phone booths throughout the Salt Lake Valley, and in the first phone booth, in the ceiling of the phone booth, and do you guys know what phone booths are?
Right. Yeah, for those that don't know.
Those that don't know, look it up. In the ceiling of the phone booth, my dad gets there. He's got an FBI agent with him laying on the floor of the car trying to radio ahead where they're making the money drop, because they're going to try and apprehend him there. So my dad sees the envelope, pulls it down, sees the Polaroid pictures that the individual had taken of me back at the house, and it makes it even more real for my father.
Of course.
The phone rings. He's instructed to go to a phone booth approximately 3300 South and 9th East roughly. Gets to that phone booth. He's then instructed after that phone booth to go to a third and final phone booth, where my dad's now instructed to make a money drop. So initially my dad, the bank would have had to pay the ransom.
Sure.
But since I had escaped, they decided to fill the bag full of paper and 5 $20 bills. So the guy asked for $125,000 and he's got a bag full of $100. So my dad makes the decision to follow through with the plans and try to help assist in apprehending the suspect. But my poor dad, when he made the money drop, he didn't have a lot of time to tell the FBI, even with them in the vehicle with him, because he had to park his vehicle at a certain point and then walk about 200 to 250 yards away from the car, which is a long way.
Yeah.
And again, it's dusk type, it's kind of getting dark. He doesn't know this area. It's a dirt road, which is now, believe it or not, I-215 on the East Bench. But my dad's got to go to this partly demolished house where there's a big blue dot painted. I mean, my dad was given very specific instructions, and I'm stunned that my dad remembered all these steps because there was a lot involved. But my father makes this money drop, and he felt like, you know, I want to run to get to my car. My dad was not very athletic to begin with, but he tried to run, and he said he just couldn't run. But he made the money drop, and then he was able to return to his vehicle. And once he returned to his vehicle, he returned home. And when he returned home, he eventually received a phone call from the kidnapper that essentially went like, you know, the kidnapper said, "I see that you've decided to notify the authorities." And my dad says, "Yes, I have." And of course, the kidnapper said, "That's too bad," and hung up.
That was it. That was the extent of the conversation.
It was. And then where I was held captive, the kidnapper believed that I was still there, and probably that the FBI or whoever was involved was messing with him or toying with him or trying to lure him out. I don't know. But essentially he went back to the chicken coop where I was held captive, or where he had left me, and he was apprehended there.
So did he go pick up the money drop?
He did pick the money up, because when he was apprehended, he had 5 $20 bills that the serial numbers matched.
Wow.
The serial numbers on the $20 bills that were left by my father.
Let's back up a little bit. He knew that your dad was a banker.
He did.
He knew your first name.
He did.
So as far as you know, was there an extensive amount of planning that he had gone through?
100%. They asked him why he chose us, why he chose our family. He said that he went to a couple of different banks in the Salt Lake Valley, and for whatever reason felt like my father was taking charge. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that looks like. And he began to follow my dad home from work. In fact, neighbors had seen an individual 2 weeks prior in our neighborhood with a dolly going up and down the sidewalk. Obviously, he was selecting the route of least resistance, or the path of least resistance on the sidewalk to transport me. He knew where I went to school. He knew that nobody else was. I have an older sister, had an older sister. Unfortunately, she's passed away as well. But he knew that he would only have to contend with me, because he had watched us enough to realize that there was only 3 of us living in that home, and that my mother was at work and my dad was at work, and I would be coming home from school, and that he would have probably minimal resistance unless a friend had come home from school with me, which didn't happen often. But he had obviously followed us enough to learn our patterns and some of our behaviors, to feel comfortable enough to probably have a window of maybe 15 to 20 minutes in my home to get me secured and out of that house before somebody would probably realize what was even transpiring.
Amazing. So he had obviously staked you out, had staked your dad out, had staked your mom out.
Had found a vacant house with a chicken coop in the backyard, knowing that nobody lived in that home, and that nobody would probably have any idea, because it was a pretty wooded area.
Right.
So I was pretty secluded. So had I not escaped, things hadn't go as planned, it would have been very difficult for somebody to find me.
Right.
At least from my perspective.
So did he give any indication after this all went down for his reasons to return? Because he didn't know that you were safe.
He did not know I was safe, correct.
The only thing that he knew in his mind was nobody else knows where he is. And so there's some power play that he could use there.
Correct.
What was his, did he ever indicate what his motivation was for going back?
He was returning to get me. They apprehended him. They had no marked cars in the area. So when he returned, they were able to swarm on him and apprehend him. My mother realized where I was safe, right? Because they were keeping her in the loop. So my mother was driving home from work, knew the exact home that I was at. Thankfully stopped by. They eventually allowed my mother and I to return home. FBI followed us home, escorted us home. They wanted us to be back with my dad. So I got home. Shortly after I got home, we were told that we needed to return back to this house. I felt bad for that family. I mean, we just flipped we flipped their day upside down, because that became Command Central, the home that I ended up at.
Right.
But they said, we've apprehended a suspect and we need Steve to come back and make an identification of him. This individual goes back to the chicken coop, thinks I'm there, gets apprehended. Now he's sitting in the back of a cop car, and now he's the one handcuffed, and he's handcuffed in front. Let me tell you a little bit about the individual that took me, if that's okay, just to give you a little bit of background. Yeah. He was 36 years old. He was approximately 5'4", 5'5", 136 pounds, not very big. He's originally from back east in the New York area, and he was actually formerly part of the mafia. He was, during his time in the mafia, he agreed to testify against some of his peers in court. So the government gave him a new name and identity and moved him out west. And we're giving him $1,000 a month, gave him a new name, gave him a new start on life. That was in Washington State. He migrated to the state of Utah, and he had stated that he had a drug and gambling problem. And that was what the money was going to be used for, was to support his drug and gambling problems or addictions. But to have an individual that was part of the mafia and part of a rough life, so to speak, it made choices, but migrated to Utah. So when they arrested him under the name of Ronald Sophia, but they soon learned that that was his federal protected witness program, and he was actually, his real name was Ronald Morello. So they did ask him when he was going back to get me, what were your intentions to go back to get that kid, or what were your intentions with the young man? And he said that I would have, number one, either killed him, or two, I would have left him for dead. So to me, I wasn't going to survive that day if he had anything to do with it, because I would imagine, Dave, if he would have got the money, he probably would have just disappeared.
Just bailed.
Yeah. I mean, why go back to me? He got what he got. He didn't have anything particularly against our family. We just happened to be the vehicle, so to speak, by which he was trying to gain his end means.
Right.
So he would have killed me or left me for dead, is what he indicated to the authorities when he was interviewed.
Well, and the fact that he wasn't careful about how he secured you in that coop, it would have made no difference to him if he had driven a nail through your head.
Not at all. He could have easily stood on top of the plywood and put bullets in me. I will tell you, when he was in the back of that police car, the individual that took me from my home had a 3 or 4 day growth of a beard, had a very thick mustache, had a full head of hair. The individual that's now sitting in the back of the police car, handcuffed, his freshly shaven beard, same mustache, and almost bald, and the hair that he did have was wet. So I picked up on that immediately, that he's changed his appearance by removing the toupee, showering, freshly shaven, like literally freshly shaven within the last 30 minutes prior to him being apprehended. So he was trying to change some of his appearances in case he did happen to run into me. So I told the police, it was interesting, Dave. I was petrified, if I'm honest with you. I'm like, where's the mirrored glass, and where's the 5 different suspects?
Right.
I'm literally standing in front of this home that I ended up at. He's in the back seat behind the driver's side. I'm on the passenger side. The window's down. So from you to I, maybe a little bit further, is this man who had just done everything to me. And they said, can you identify him? And I said, I think that's your guy, but I need to hear him speak because of his very thick, distinctive New York accent. I told my mother, I said, he sounds like our friend Fred, because we had a friend from back east that sounded just like that.
Right.
And he said, well, I hope you're not accusing me of anything, because I've done nothing wrong. And immediately, I don't remember this, but my mother does. I remember pointing at him and I said, "That's your man." And I said, "That's your man." And my mother said, she said that I literally just collapsed to the road. I mean, I fell to the road because I think what had happened was, Dave, is everything, my adrenaline was pumping, right? And then I got safe and secured, and I had all those young people around me offering me cake and ice cream and wanting to feed me. And then when I get home, the home's buzzing, neighbors are coming over, news stations are there trying to get interviews. So everything was just really, it was continuously moving. And I think once I finally got in front of this individual and everything really just kind of came to a head, so to speak, and I realized what really had transpired, and took a minute to think about it. And to think that this guy tried to take me, he didn't try, he successfully took me out of my home, he secured me. I'm first of all, I'm sure he was like, what in the world, how did this happen? How am I now in a police car handcuffed and you're standing outside of the window free? It was a sobering moment for me when everything just kind of came to the head. And I think I was relieved, I think I was petrified. I thought, I'm thankful my parents are okay. How am I going to move forward with this? There was just a lot of things that piled up on me at that moment. And I don't remember collapsing, but my mother said I just collapsed to the ground.
How has the process been of being able to process that whole ordeal? I mean, that's trauma.
Yeah, absolutely, it was trauma. It's interesting. I look at life as being, I look at the cup as being half full as opposed to half empty.
Sure.
I feel like I have a pretty positive outlook on life, at least I try to. That incident absolutely changed my life forever. Going back to school was difficult, but I had a lot of phenomenal friends and people around me, my community, my scout troop, my parents, my neighbors. A lot of good people around me really buoyed me up. But I think the best thing that transpired for me was having somebody ask me to share my story. Do you remember Mr. Hayward?
Yeah.
English teacher.
English teacher, yeah.
He called me Smiley because I was always smiling.
Right.
He pulled me aside. That happened on a Thursday, Dave. I was in school Monday. I'm like, why didn't the bank send us to Disneyland for 7 days or whatever? I was back in school Monday.
Oh my gosh.
Mr. Hayward pulled me aside and he said, he goes, "Hey, listen, I don't want to even tell you I have any idea what transpired with you." And he said, "I'm sure your classmates would probably love to hear your story, but," he said, "that's your decision.
Right.
If you choose to share, we'll have you share. If you choose not to, we respect that." And I said, I think I can do my best to share. So he said, "Okay, on Thursday, we'll have you share on Thursday." He brought a cake, and the cake said, "Most of us are glad you survived." I don't know who wasn't, but anyway, but I think what transpired was I had a really good support system. I had people that were there for me. I had people that allowed me to share. I've never had any nightmares. I've never had any, I think literally being able to verbalize and share, because people are interested, right? I mean, people, sure. It's not every day you meet somebody that's been through a kidnapping and survived.
Right.
So I think being able to verbalize it really helped me heal, helped me overcome the trauma. I thought, why do people want to hear this story? That, I think that's just a natural, why do people care? Why do people want to hear my story? But I'm very thankful. I still probably, that happened in '83 and here we are in 2026, 43 years later. I still have the opportunity to quite frequently share my story. And I'm just astounded that people are still as enthralled as they are. Again, it's not me, it's the story. And there's a lot of bad things that transpired that day, but there's so many good things that came out of that day as well. And I'm thankful that I've been able to recognize not just the bad, but recognize the good and allow the good to overcome the bad.
Right.
Do you want to know what happened to the guy?
Absolutely.
Is that an important part of the story?
Absolutely.
So we went to court. I was prepared to testify, scared to death because we're in a federal court, because it's a federal offense.
Sure.
We're downtown Salt Lake. I'm scared to death. I see the individual. Heart started to race, and I fully expected to testify, but thankfully he pleaded guilty to the kidnapping charge, and they dropped a few other charges they had on him. And thankfully I didn't have to testify. He got a 20-year sentence, which was the maximum back then. Now it's punishable by life. But so he served his time. He was also found guilty of another crime that he had committed because somebody recognized him on TV, and he had robbed O.C. Tanner's, actually, the jeweler.
Yeah.
He served on my time about 13 and a half years in a federal penitentiary. After that time was complete, they moved him back to Utah to serve the time he had been found guilty for robbing O.C. Tanner's. He served about 13 years of a 20-year sentence there. And then he was released. And then when he was released, he was actually picked up by the state of New York because the crimes that he'd previously been forgiven of because of the Federal Protected Witness Program, those crimes fell back upon him because he lost his new identity and became who he really was. And so he was picked up by the state of New York. I was worried, if I'm being honest, because my parents lived in the same home.
Yeah.
I'm now married with children of my own. These days, you can easily locate somebody if you choose to. So I was really worried, not about myself, but about my family. So I was thankful that he was picked up and taken back to the state of New York to serve time for crimes. My mother, bless her heart, January 6th every year, she used to call the state because it's public information as to what's going on. So the year she found out he was up for parole, my parents were pretty petrified. Thankfully, from a mutual friend of ours that was a parole officer at the time, did a little digging for me and found out that he was not going to be paroled here in the state, that he would be taken back to the state of New York. So we didn't have to really worry about it.
That's amazing. Have you come to terms with him? What's your feeling about this guy who perpetrated a horrible thing on you?
I appreciate that question because I got the same question from my mother when I was serving an LDS mission.
Yeah.
My mother wrote me and she's like, have you forgiven this guy yet? And I thought, no better place, in my opinion, to forgive somebody for something they had done, because if I didn't forgive Dave, I think I would be carrying a weight that I don't desire to carry. I think it's important that when people cause harm to us or when people do things to us that we don't desire to have done to us, that if we don't allow ourselves to forgive and move on, that we too carry that weight. Don't kid yourself in the sense that I don't think about being kidnapped every day, because I can tell you, sorry, I literally think about it every day in some way, shape, or form. When I had kids, I worried about my children. I have grandbabies now, I worry about them. I see things, I hear things, and it reminds me of that day, but in a grateful way. I have a lot of gratitude, believe it or not, for what transpired. I'm not grateful it happened to me, but I'm grateful it happened the way that it did.
Right.
So had I not forgiven that individual, I think I would have carried a weight that I didn't desire to carry. So I think that's a very important component of when things happen to us, or when we do things to other people, that we need to be forgiven or we need to forgive. And I just think for me, because of my upbringing and because of the things that I learned and the people that were around me, I had the ability to forgive that individual for things that he had done to me.
The stories of forgiveness, we often think that if we forgive somebody a trespass that they have committed, that it's relieving them of something, when that forgiveness is really relieving ourselves.
I agree with that.
Of something.
Yeah, I do agree with that, 100%. Now, I haven't seen him since we went to court. And I don't know if I'd go face to face with him if I was ever given the opportunity. I don't know if he's still alive.
Sure. Well, you're an old man now, so he's got to be.
He was 36 at the time, and that's 43 years ago. So you can do the math because you're better at that than me.
Okay.
79.
See.
Maybe it is. Check us. I don't know. Sounds good.
Right.
But anyway, yeah, it was a crazy day that changed my life forever. I received a Medal of Merit for bravery for the Boy Scouts of America. I don't think I was deserving of that. Somebody felt otherwise. I'm grateful that I pursued that because, I know Boy Scouts have changed, but when they were when I was younger, it was very important to me. So to have received that Medal of Merit, I was a write-up in Boy's Life about it. I was very proud of that. I'm grateful that my family pushed me to actually apply for that, because they don't give out Medal of Merits very often.
Right.
But so another great thing came out of that.
Right. Well, thanks, Dave. Thanks for sharing your story. This is the first time that I've actually heard your story.
No, it's not.
Other than the surface.
Wow.
You know, classmate was kidnapped. He escaped.
Let's move on.
and let's move on.
Let's go.
I didn't know a lot of the details that you shared, and I didn't know where you were mentally with the whole thing, and so thank you for sharing that, because that's really the benefit that everybody out there can take away from this experience. And you mentioned the gratitude that you feel for having gone through that with a positive outcome, right? And are there any situations that you can pinpoint where your story has inspired somebody else and they have communicated that to you?
Yeah, why do you keep making me cry, Dave? I've shared my story many places, many times. I've been in juvenile detention centers sharing my story. I've been in a lot of different faith buildings sharing my story. I've been in community-based buildings. I've been in people's homes. And I've seen people have the courage, after I've shared my story, to share things that have happened to them. Because here's the reality, Dave. We've all had something happen to us, or we will all have something happen to us. Mine just happens to be an abduction that I survived, but everybody goes through hard things. Everybody has challenges. So yes, I have had many people share with me that they're grateful that I had the courage to share, because it's given them the courage to share as well. They've shared it with me. They've shared it with their parents. You know, it doesn't really matter. But I think it's important, because sometimes I think we all carry something that we don't need to carry always.
Right.
And to have the ability to just verbalize and share sometimes really lifts a weight and can help people get through challenges. Yeah. I've had teenager kids share things that have happened to them that shouldn't have happened to them, but they got the courage to share. So thankfully for me, many times I've had somebody step forward, ask to speak to me after, and share what's transpired. And then of course, we follow the necessary lines to involve those that need to be involved if that's the case. But yes.
Right. That's great. And let that be a takeaway for anybody out there who has experienced some things. To be able to vocalize it is cathartic, for one thing, and you never know who's listening, that your courage of sharing your story, and also the inspiration that of how you've overcome, can be a positive for a number of people out there. You're a good man, Steve. Thanks for sharing.
You're a better man, brother.
Thanks for sharing
yeah,
that.
Absolutely.
So, and thank you for tuning in here. And hey, stay on the nice list, huh?